September 1st, 1939. German forces pushed deep into Poland, aiming for a fast and total victory. Just 20 years earlier, their ancestors had marched, but in the opposite direction as a defeated army returning home. In November 1918, after 4 long years of World War I, Germany's Emperor Kaiser Wilhelm II was forced to step down. His troops had been battered by relentless attacks from British, French, and American forces, while civilians faced starvation. Yet a dangerous story had already begun to spread. German generals and soldiers claimed they had not lost on the battlefield. They were betrayed by cowardly politicians. Still, at 11 o'clock in the morning on November 11th, 1918, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, World War I officially ended. The next month, U.S. President Woodrow Wilson arrived in Europe, promising to create a new world order. He convinced leaders to join the League of Nations, hoping disputes between nations would now be solved through debate rather than war. Europe's people were freed, and Germany's ally, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, was dismantled. From its ruins emerged new countries: Austria, Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. Germany itself was greatly reduced, but this new order carried a hidden danger. Not everyone celebrated the birth of nations like Czechoslovakia. Many contained significant German populations. One day, the desire to reunite these people would trouble Europe once more. Germany, humiliated by war, suffered one final blow. It had to pay £66 billion in reparations to France and Britain, far beyond what its economy could handle. Meanwhile, Wilson returned to America to find his vision crumbling. The U.S. Congress refused to join the League of Nations, determined to avoid another European war. America retreated into isolation. Germany had changed. It remained Europe's largest nation, but its militaristic monarchy was gone. A democracy, the Weimar Republic, replaced it, but it faced immediate challenges. Street battles erupted between extreme right-wing nationalists and communists, each trying to seize control. Then, in 1923, hyperinflation struck. Prices skyrocketed hundreds of % per month, wiping out ordinary savings. The perfect environment emerged for fiery, radical politicians. Among them was Adolf Hitler. After the turmoil of hyperinflation and street clashes in Weimar Germany, the stage was set for a new type of political figure, charismatic, radical, and unafraid to exploit the fears of the people. Among them was Adolf Hitler. Born in Austria, Hitler had served bravely in World War I, earning the Iron Cross for his efforts. But after the war, he returned to a Germany that seemed chaotic, fragile, and desperate for direction. Settling in Munich, Hitler quickly became known for his fiery speeches, which struck chords of nationalism and resentment among ordinary Germans. He joined the small National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazis, and within a short time rose to lead it. His ambition was clear. Germany had been humiliated, and it was his mission to restore its strength, pride, and power. In 1923, Hitler attempted to seize control through force with the failed Beer Hall Putsch. Arrested and sentenced to prison, he used the time to write Mein Kampf, My Struggle, a manifesto that outlined his ideology, blaming Germany's problems on Jews, calling for the rebuilding of the nation, and insisting on expansion eastward to secure living space. On his release, he focused on transforming the Nazi Party into a disciplined political machine, planning to gain power through the democratic system rather than by outright revolution. For several years, the Weimar Republic recovered some stability, and support for extremist parties waned. But the opportunity for Hitler returned with the global economic disaster. The stock market crash in the United States in 1929 triggered a worldwide depression. Germany, already fragile, suffered immensely. Unemployment soared to over 6 million, and ordinary Germans felt abandoned by traditional politics. Hitler and the Nazis offered simple answers to complex problems, promising revival, order, and national pride. By 1931, the movement had grown into a mass phenomenon, complete with the SA, or stormtroopers, numbering nearly 3 million. In the 1932 elections, the Nazis became the largest party in the Reichstag, Germany's parliament. Yet Hitler refused to form a coalition, leaving the government paralyzed. Faced with a deadlock, President Hindenburg appointed Hitler as Chancellor in January 1933. Within weeks, the Reichstag fire provided a pretext for Hitler to claim emergency powers, which he immediately used to outlaw other political parties. By August 1934, with Hindenburg's death, Hitler declared himself Führer, Germany's absolute leader. He now controlled every aspect of government, military, and society. For the first few years, Hitler focused on economic revival. Millions were put to work on public projects, including highways and infrastructure, dramatically reducing unemployment. Behind the scenes, however, he was secretly rearming the military. The Versailles Treaty had limited Germany's army to 100,000 men and banned tanks, aircraft, and submarines. Hitler defied these limits, tripling the army and creating an air force, the Luftwaffe, in 1935, far surpassing Britain and France. By reoccupying the Saar region and sending troops into the Rhineland, Hitler began reclaiming what he claimed as Germany's rightful territory. At the 1936 Berlin Olympics, the world saw a Germany that appeared disciplined, orderly, and ambitious, but not yet threatening. The seeds of aggression were sown, and Hitler's popularity surged. While Germany was rebuilding under Hitler, tensions were also rising in Asia. Japan, a rapidly industrializing nation, faced limited natural resources and growing population pressures. Its leaders believed expansion was essential for survival and dominance. In 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria, claiming the need to protect its interests and maintain order. The League of Nations condemned the move, but without real power to enforce sanctions, Japan continued its expansion, eventually leaving the League entirely. In Europe, Hitler's ambitions grew bolder. He eyed Austria and Czechoslovakia, arguing that ethnic Germans in those regions should be united under Germany. In 1938, the Anschluss formally annexed Austria, and the following year, the Munich Agreement allowed Germany to seize the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia, appeasing Hitler in the hopes of avoiding war. However, Hitler's true plan was never appeasement. By March 1939, Germany occupied the rest of Czechoslovakia, shocking Europe and proving that Hitler would not be satisfied with partial gains. Meanwhile, he had signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with the Soviet Union, a non-aggression treaty that secretly divided Eastern Europe into spheres of influence, setting the stage for the invasion of Poland. September 1, 1939, marked the beginning of World War II. German forces, using a new strategy called blitzkrieg, or lightning war, quickly overwhelmed Poland from the west, while the Soviets attacked from the east. Within weeks, Poland was defeated, and Europe was plunged into conflict. After Poland fell, Hitler turned his attention west. In April 1940, German forces invaded Denmark and Norway to secure strategic positions and vital resources. Both countries fell quickly, demonstrating the effectiveness of blitzkrieg tactics. By May, Germany launched a massive offensive against France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. The Allies had prepared for a repeat of World War I strategies, but Germany bypassed the heavily fortified Maginot Line, moving through the Ardennes forest. Within weeks, German troops reached the French coast, trapping British and French forces. The evacuation at Dunkirk rescued hundreds of thousands of Allied soldiers, but it was a retreat and a humbling defeat. France surrendered in June 1940, leaving Germany in control of most of Western Europe. Meanwhile, Britain stood alone. Winston Churchill became Prime Minister and rallied the nation, promising never to surrender. Hitler attempted to force Britain into submission through air attacks in the Battle of Britain. The Luftwaffe targeted cities and military installations, hoping to weaken morale and destroy the Royal Air Force. British pilots, however, fought fiercely, and radar technology gave them an advantage. By October 1940, Germany's plan had failed, marking the first major defeat for Hitler. In the Mediterranean, Italy entered the war on Germany's side. attacking British-held territories in North Africa and Greece. Their initial campaigns were poorly planned and executed, requiring German intervention to stabilize the front. North Africa became a critical battleground, with both sides vying for control of strategic ports, oil, and the Suez Canal. By 1941, Hitler turned toward his most ambitious and dangerous objective, the Soviet Union. Despite the non-aggression pact signed with Stalin, Hitler had always intended to invade. He believed the vast lands of the East would provide Germany with living space and resources, while destroying what he saw as the threat of Bolshevism. On June 22, 1941, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest land invasion in history. Over 3 million Axis troops surged across the Soviet border along a massive front stretching from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. At first, the advance was devastating. Soviet forces were caught off guard, and entire armies were encircled and destroyed. Cities fell rapidly as German panzer divisions pushed deeper into Soviet territory. But the Soviet Union did not collapse as Hitler had expected. Despite enormous losses, Soviet industry was relocated east of the Ural Mountains, beyond the reach of German bombers. Fresh troops were mobilized, and resistance stiffened. As German forces approached Moscow, the harsh Russian winter began to take its toll. Supplies ran short, vehicles failed in freezing temperatures, and soldiers suffered terribly in the cold. In December 1941, Soviet counterattacks pushed the exhausted German army back from the gates of Moscow. The quick victory Hitler had promised turned into a prolonged and brutal war of attrition. The Eastern Front would become the deadliest theater of the war, consuming millions of lives. Meanwhile, events were unfolding across the globe that would soon transform the conflict into a truly world war. Tensions between Japan and the United States had been escalating due to Japanese expansion in Asia and American economic sanctions. On December 7, 1941, Japan launched a surprise attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Battleships were sunk, aircraft destroyed, and over 2,000 Americans killed. The next day, the United States declared war on Japan. Shortly afterward, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States. What had begun as a European conflict was now a global struggle involving the world's greatest powers. With the United States now fully engaged, the war expanded across vast oceans and continents. In the Pacific, Japan moved swiftly after Pearl Harbor, capturing territories across Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands. The Philippines, Malaya, Singapore, and the Dutch East Indies fell in rapid succession. Japan seemed unstoppable, building a defensive perimeter across thousands of miles of ocean. However, in June 1942, the tide began to turn. At the Battle of Midway, American codebreakers intercepted Japanese plans and prepared an ambush. In a decisive naval clash, U.S. aircraft carriers struck first, sinking 4 Japanese carriers. It was a devastating blow from which Japan would never fully recover. From that moment, Japan shifted from expansion to defense. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, the fighting reached unimaginable levels of brutality. In 1942, German forces pushed toward the oil fields of the Caucasus and the city of Stalingrad. What followed became one of the bloodiest battles in history. Street by street, building by building, German and Soviet soldiers fought in ruins reduced to rubble. By winter, the Soviet Red Army launched a massive counteroffensive, encircling the German Sixth Army inside Stalingrad. Cut off from supplies and facing freezing temperatures, the trapped German forces endured months of suffering. In February 1943, the remaining survivors surrendered. It was a crushing defeat and a turning point in the war. From then on, Germany would be pushed steadily westward. In North Africa, British forces under General Montgomery clashed with German troops led by General Erwin Rommel, known as the Desert Fox. After fierce fighting at El Alamein in late 1942, the Axis advance was halted. Soon after, American forces landed in Morocco and Algeria in Operation Torch, squeezing Axis forces from both east and west. By May 1943, North Africa was cleared of Axis troops. The Allies now began planning their next moves. In July 1943, they invaded Sicily, followed by mainland Italy. Mussolini's regime collapsed, and he was arrested by his own government. Although Germany rescued him and established a puppet state in northern Italy, the Italian campaign dragged on in difficult terrain. By 1944, momentum had shifted decisively to the Allies. In the east, Soviet forces were advancing relentlessly. In the west, Britain and the United States prepared for the long-awaited invasion of Nazi-occupied France. The final phase of the war in Europe was approaching. By 1944, the Allies were ready to strike directly at Hitler's fortress in Western Europe. After years of preparation, deception plans, and the build-up of troops and equipment in Britain, the invasion of France was set in motion. On June 6, 1944, D-Day, thousands of ships crossed the English Channel as Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy. American, British, and Canadian troops landed under heavy fire. Paratroopers had already dropped behind enemy lines during the night to disrupt German defenses. The fighting was intense and costly, especially at Omaha Beach, but by the end of the day, the Allies had secured a foothold. Over the following weeks, more troops and supplies poured into France. German forces fought fiercely, but they were stretched thin and increasingly weakened by constant Soviet pressure in the east. By August 1944, Paris was liberated, and the Allies pushed toward the German border. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, the Red Army launched massive offensives that shattered German lines. Soviet troops advanced through Poland and into Eastern Europe, liberating cities, but also imposing their own influence. The war was clearly turning against Germany on all sides. Inside Germany, Allied bombers relentlessly targeted industrial centers and cities. The destruction was immense. Transportation networks collapsed, factories were crippled, and civilian morale declined. Yet Hitler refused to surrender, demanding total resistance. In December 1944, Germany launched one final major offensive in the West, the Battle of the Bulge. In a surprise winter attack through the Ardennes, German forces attempted to split the Allied lines. For a brief moment, they created a bulge in the front, but fierce American resistance and a lack of fuel doomed the effort. By early 1945, the offensive had failed, exhausting Germany's remaining reserves. As Allied forces crossed the Rhine River from the west and Soviet armies closed in from the east, Germany's defeat became inevitable. Cities lay in ruins, supplies were gone, and the once mighty Wehrmacht was collapsing. In April 1945, Soviet troops entered Berlin. Street fighting erupted in the capital. With enemy forces only blocks away, Adolf Hitler retreated to his bunker beneath the city. On April 30, 1945, he took his own life. A few days later, on May 7, 1945, Germany formally surrendered. The war in Europe was over. But while victory celebrations spread across the continent, the conflict in the Pacific was still raging. Even as Germany collapsed in Europe, the war in the Pacific continued with relentless intensity. After Midway and Guadalcanal, Allied forces adopted a strategy known as island hopping. Instead of attacking every Japanese-held position, they targeted key islands, capturing airfields and cutting off enemy strongholds. The fighting was brutal. On islands like Iwo Jima and Okinawa, Japanese forces resisted to the last man. Soldiers fought from fortified tunnels and bunkers, and civilians were often caught in the devastation. Casualties mounted on both sides, and it became clear that an invasion of Japan's main islands would be extraordinarily costly. Meanwhile, American bombers intensified their campaign against Japanese cities. Massive firebombing raids destroyed large portions of urban centers, causing widespread destruction and loss of life. Still, Japan's leadership showed no sign of surrender. In August 1945, a new and terrifying weapon was used for the first time in warfare. On August 6, an atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, destroying the city in an instant. 3 days later, a second bomb struck Nagasaki. The devastation was unprecedented, with tens of thousands killed immediately and many more suffering in the aftermath. Faced with overwhelming destruction and the Soviet Union's declaration of war against Japan, the Japanese government agreed to surrender. On September 2, 1945, aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, Japan formally signed the documents of surrender. World War II was finally over. The war had lasted 6 years and involved nations across every inhabited continent. Tens of millions of soldiers and civilians had died. Cities were reduced to rubble, economies shattered, and entire societies transformed. In the aftermath, new global powers emerged. The United States and the Soviet Union stood as superpowers, their uneasy alliance soon giving way to the Cold War. International leaders created the United Nations, hoping to prevent another catastrophe on such a scale. World War II reshaped borders, ideologies, and the balance of power around the world. Its lessons, sacrifices, and consequences continue to influence global politics and human memory to this day.